It's the easiest conversation having a book. And I had some aha moments last week. I sat on some Zoom meetings and I had 2 meetings where they held the book up and they said, "Hey, Devin, I finished your book yesterday. Here's some takeaways." That's how my meeting started. It's easier to book a meeting. It's usually easier to move them through a sales process. The book rate's higher. Everything's better because you're set up, you're edified. Versus cold marketing, where we're trying to pull people in and we're trying to nurture and do all these things, which works, but at a very small ratio. Yesterday, I received 11 connections just yesterday. This is real time. Stop chasing the ideal client and start chasing the people who have access to your ideal client.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
Devin, you're a published author. We were going to start with story time. We were joking. You have your book right in front of you. Any stories or quotes from the book you want to start with?
Yeah, for sure. I know you always ask for a quote, and it's easier to just read this one because it's longer, but it's super impactful. So I'm going to go ahead and just read. It's the beginning of chapter 1. People influence people. Nothing influences people more than a recommendation from a trusted friend. A trusted referral influences people more than the best broadcast message. A trusted referral is the holy grail of advertising, by none other than Mark Zuckerberg.
Expand on that a little bit. Everybody wants referrals. Trust is like a buzzword. Talk about the true power of that quote and the true power of a trusted referral.
Yeah, right below that's the chapter title. And the chapter title is The Referral Dilemma. And it's what all entrepreneurs and business professionals face is we want more referrals. We love trusted referrals because we're endorsed, right? It's easier to book a meeting. It's usually easier to move them through a sales process. The book rate's higher. Everything's better because you're set up, you're edified. Versus cold marketing, where we're trying to pull people in and we're trying to nurture and do all these things, which works, but at a very small ratio. And that's the dilemma. But the problem really is, how do we get referrals consistently? What's the system? What's the process? What's the magic? That's the trick.
So let's talk about that, because I know I've been a sucker of if then, and it's true. If I do a really good job and deliver results and show up the best I can, then I'll deserve a referral, a testimonial. But that's a long process and it's not predictable and it's not even guaranteed. How do we make our systems a little more predictable?
Yeah. So step 1 is what I call the connection expansion exercise. And this is probably, I know we talked about, there's going to be some homework. So this is a teaser for that. So the connection expansion exercise is this idea. It's actually chapter 3 in my book. It's this idea of stop chasing the ideal client and start chasing the people who have access to your ideal client. So often when I ask people, who can I connect you with? The answer is the ideal client. I want to connect with blank. And sometimes they justify it because they spend the most, they're easiest to sell to, blah, blah, blah. What happens though is when I try to connect you, Ben, to that ideal client you define, right? I am setting someone up to be sold. And the quote that I love to use is, everybody wants to buy, nobody wants to be sold. That quote should be on your monitor, write it on a post-it note, put it somewhere, because you need to stop selling. You need to start connecting and you need to build meaningful relationships. So if we switch through the connection expansion exercise, we switch who we're targeting to the people who have access, the vendors, where people gather, where they seek education, who inspires them, who they trust with infinite credibility. Those people, we then can make easy connections because it's strategic in nature. We want to strategize. We want to collaborate. We're not positioning anyone to be sold. So it makes the connection easier. And it actually moves us from a one-to-one to a one-to-many to a many-to-many relationship strategy, which unlocks the exponential potential in your network.
Okay, so give us a case study of some kind, a clear example to bring it to light. How do we bridge that gap? We want to be authentic. Like, I don't want to be just in a transactional business. Like, I'm going to do this because it's give us a good example of like a way to do that. Even the word referral is not always my favorite. Like, I want to connect. Yeah, it'll lead to introductions and business. What's an example of authentic way to do that really works?
Yeah, so let me address referrals and connections. It's distinct
Please.
language,
Sure.
and it's actually a call out in the book for that reason,
Mm,
because referral is defined as an introduction to a prospective client. That's how I define it.
got it.
A connection is defined as an introduction simply made to your organization with no assumptions about what that connection will turn into. That's the magic, right? There's so much magic in open connections, right? Because that's where we get the opportunity to find value. And so I'll give you a real example. I was introduced to someone today. I sat on a financial planner, business partners. We do the connection, we're talking, I'm learning about them, and I'm taking notes, right? Because my promise to anyone I meet with is I will make 3 connections for you following our meeting. No matter who I meet with, I will impact you through connections. I wrote a book about it. I hope I can do it. I sat with them and it was hard for them because they answered with ideal client, an ideal client, an ideal client, exactly how I demonstrated. So I kind of pulled and nurtured.
Yeah.
Come to find out, she's like, you know what? We're looking for female CPAs. Great. I have 2. And yes, they have access to your ideal clients. Great collaboration. So now for me, I can make those introductions. Now, here's where the magic starts to happen. I add value to the person I met with by making the 3 introductions, 2 for one partner, 1 for the other. It gives me permission to follow up with everyone I'm connecting. So 2-3 weeks from now, I can follow up with all those individuals independently and say, hey, did you connect with so-and-so? How was the conversation? So now I not only added value to both parties, I have permission to follow up, which allows me to nurture. It allows me to continue to engage in a conversation. If we know anything about sales, sales is about touches. The more touches we can have with someone, the easier it is to then ask them to take some action down the road. But often people jump straight to the ask instead of doing the nurturing, instead of adding the value, instead of positioning. You got to do all the other work first.
Doesn't that sound exhausting though, Devin? I meet someone, I got to make 3 intros, I have to follow up. How's this gonna? And I'm intentionally playing like the other end of things because I see so much value in everything you're saying, but like it really does sound like a lot of work. It sounds like a big energy spend to be intro, follow up, follow up, follow up. When do I get some?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And there's 2 answers. The first answer is let's just talk about the statistics.
Hmm.
Yesterday, I received 11 connections just yesterday. Okay. This is real time. Like I had to spend this morning following up because I was like, oh my gosh, where did all these come from? Right. Even when I went through a season of not selling, I had no product to offer. I was kind of in a family season. Businesses were all kind of wound down. I would average 3 connections a week received. And I wasn't networking, I wasn't marketing. That was just the nurtured network producing connections because they thought there was value, right? So the system, once implemented long term, will continue to generate results in an exponential way that you can't fathom. But the other truth is you have to do the work, right?
Mm.
And that is the one thing that sets you apart from anyone else, whether it's a business professional, sales professional, business owner. The truth is in the follow up. Most people promise a lot. If you've been on meetings and you've been out networking, you've probably been promised by someone, oh, I'll connect you with so and so. Oh, I'll do this for you. The majority of people don't do it. So the fact that you take the action and you deliver on what you say not only adds value, it makes you extremely credible. And by you becoming credible, you position yourself as an authority. You move into a position where in that relationship, they look to you and go, you know what? Devin's a man of his word. Ben is a man of his word. I'm going to support you. I'm going to make connections back. And what inevitably happens after I make the 3 introductions, I follow up. People who are new to the process, 1 out of 3, this is the exact one. Hey, Devin, those connections were super valuable. What can I do for you? When's the last time someone on a consistent basis asked you what they can do for you? That's the magic, right? So this is the art. But yes, it does take work and it takes a system and a process.
Devin, I jokingly sometimes call that a free trial because no one paid you to do anything, but they know what it would feel like if they did. for all
100%.
the reasons you just gave. And what about, so it's easy for someone like Devin, he's a published author, he's getting on podcasts. Like, what if someone doesn't have a book, they don't have a big brand? Like, it's easy to connect if you're this big speaker or author, right? What if you're just getting started? Is it still worth it? Is it still easy? Do people still want to know me?
Oh, it's such a good question. And the answer is yes. And so another output of the connection expansion exercise
Hmm.
is it takes the pressure off, because the last category I tell you to identify through the connection expansion exercise is connectors. Ben's a connector. I'm a connector. There's lots of connectors. Think about someone in your network. Everyone knows a few people who just seem to know everybody. The best part about this strategy and the systems that I talk about is that as long as you have access to a couple connectors,
Hmm.
you can add value. Because worst case scenario, if someone gives you an ask or you're trying to find a connection for someone, but just feel like you can't, you can always default to a connector, because a connector can always add value. Ideally, you grow your network and you become the connector, right? That's gold. But until then, just leverage those people in your network, because you'll be adding value to them, helping them expand their network. And in turn, they'll make you look like a rock star.
So, and let's say Devin makes 5 intros for Ben. I don't want him to regret it because I was a schlub on, like, what I know we're going deep here, but
Let's
like,
do it.
I just met someone. What does that connection call look like? I assume it doesn't look like, hey, nice to meet you. What problems do you have? I'm going to sell you on this product. What does it look like? What's the best way to do this at the bare bones level?
Yeah, your questions are so good. All these answers are in the book. And I know, like, I don't want to be the guy that's just shouting out the book, but I tried to be super, super simple in the book
Sure.
around the system, right? I tried to take these things and really talk about them. And so I talk about booking what I call connection meetings. In a connection meeting, we are not selling. It is really going to a consultative sales approach, which we won't go deep in. But this is the way I frame those meetings. Any first meeting with someone I was introduced to. What do you do? We have to know that. I got to understand what we're playing with, right? What's your company? What are you selling? I need to know that general information. How'd you get here? I need historical data, right? How long have you been doing it? Why did you come into this industry? What was the back? It allows me to look for connections. Where are you going? I want to be inspired and I want to be part of that journey, right? What's your future and how can I support that is what I'm looking for. And then I always ask what's in the way. Like, what are your challenges, the things that are blockers today between where you are and where you want to be? Just with that information over a 30-minute or hour meeting, I have enough information to make impactful connections to inspire you. And the other thing I take away from the meeting is I have the ability to properly edify you, because I have to be able to edify you in the connection email so that the person I'm introducing you to goes, I have to take this meeting. Ben is such a rock star because of how Devin introduced them. I'm taking the meeting. I may not fully understand why, and I may think Devin is absolutely crazy, but I'm taking the meeting because Ben's edified. He seems like a rock star. And you know what? I got 30 minutes for Ben.
I love it. One main last thing here, Devin, and I want to like super obviously tee you up here only because I know the value in it. Like I'm a humble guy, but I'll get arrogant for a moment here. I've got a kick-ass podcast. I put on free networking events and I have a private mastermind that I have the ability to open the door and provide a complimentary guest pass at any time. So I'm easy to be introduced because there's so much value I can give the people for free. I'm an easy introduction. Does something like having a book, like, has that helped podcast for me? But like, I don't have a book yet. Has that helped? Do you become an easier introduction? Do you become a higher authority? Like, has that helped or is it a misnomer?
Yeah, having a book, and I know we talked about this before we hit record, but
Well, I was like, that's the only thing I
it's
don't have, Devin. Like,
it's
do I need a
yeah.
book?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a lot of companies over the last 15 years, my own, sold, bought, all sorts of stuff, right? I have one of those bios. If you go to my website, it's really long and it's all over the place. This is for sure one of the things I'd wish I'd done sooner. And I was at an expo yesterday, and what I found is it's the easiest conversation having a book. And I had some aha moments last week. I sat on some Zoom meetings, and I had 2 meetings where they held the book up and they said, Hey, Devin, I finished your book yesterday. Here's some takeaways. That's how my meeting started. So not only does it make you easier to introduce because you can include the link and people will say, hey, it's published, they book meetings. Of those 11 I was introduced to yesterday, 6 of them have booked meetings. Those emails were sent this morning. So we're talking like 5 hours to those meetings being booked. Um, the book ratio is higher. There's no friction. Like it just makes it easy. The system will work without a book. Don't get me wrong. It works, right? And it has worked for me for a decade. But having a book already has eliminated any friction that was there.
It's so funny because even with all the stuff Ben's doing, every month my girlfriend's like, you should have a book. It makes you reputable. And I'm like, I have thousands of hours of free podcast content. She's like, yeah, but you don't have a book. There's some real stuff there, right?
Hey, we're gonna work with you at $1 Million Author at some point, and we're gonna help Ben have a book. But it's got to be your time and it's got to fit your journey. But yes, I'm sure you have a lot of impactful stuff to share.
So I always bring a pen and paper. I know some people are at the gym, they're driving this or that. I always say timestamp this if you need to, but I'm literally gonna write it down. We're gonna give an assignment because I always call it an integration assignment. This was quick to the point, but it's not meant to be shelf help. It's meant to actually be like integrated. So I've got my pen. I want people to grab theirs. But before we do, I almost forgot. How can we support you? Buy the book, work with you. What's the best way to support Devin? I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, 100%. You know what? Just buy the book. I wrote the book so that I could add value to you, which is one of my core principles. And I'm going to stand behind that. Like, I'd love for you to grab a copy. I'd love for you to shoot me an email and tell me something you took away from it, a cool lesson learned, or share an impactful connection you get by using the strategies. That motivates me and inspires me. Yes, there's some calls to action in there you can lean into if you feel inspired. But at a minimum, grab a copy. If you like it, leave a review. I'd love to be able to positively impact you through that.
Cool. Just Amazon.com, or is there?
That's it. Yeah. Live on Amazon. You can get Kindle version, paperback, hardcover, or audiobook. The audiobook should be out by the time this is posted.
That'll be in the notes. I should be putting affiliate links, Devin, because we're about to sell like 2 billion books overnight. So that's in the notes. I already kind of teased this. Give us an assignment. I want to be better as early as now. What's in simple step we can do to be better as early as now?
Yeah, I'm going to try to give this to you as quick and simple as possible.
Take your time. I call this 15-minute Friday. I think I'm going to change the name because when something's valuable, I'm like, I'll give it 20. I'll give it 25. Take your time. And yeah, go ahead, Devin.
Perfect. So the connection expansion exercise I talked about earlier is really the key to unlocking the system. And there's a lot of aha moments just going through this exercise. I'm going to give you an example and then I'm going to give you the work. And so the example I like to share is with realtors. If we think about realtors and I ask realtors, who do you want to connect with, right? They'll give you the ideal client profile, right? First time buyers, second time buyers, relocation, whatever it is, right? Pick something. If we go a step further, okay, who do you want to actually connect with? Like, who refers you business? It's always one of two things: insurance agents, right? Or mortgage lenders. They answer the same two. The challenge is everyone in that industry answers the same way. So you're out there pounding the pavement, knocking doors and trying to meet the same people. That doesn't work, right? So how do we expand that so we can be unique and we can have a different ask and we can build different relationships, right? This is the journey we go on. And so kind of keep that realtor in mind as I prompt you. But think about your own experience. So the first thing I always say is, who's your ideal client, right? Pick one profile, just one hyper-specific ideal client, write it down. And then we're going to just expand. And so the next thing you're going to talk about on your list is vendors. Where does your ideal client spend money? Just jot down a couple, right? So if we think about the realtor and they think about that, first-time home buyer, where else do they spend money? They spend money on pest control. They spend money on the alarm company, the solar guy, right? If it's a first-time parent, they might spend money at daycare and childcares, right? They're spending money somewhere. So where does your ideal client spend money, right? The next bucket is education. Where does your ideal client seek education? Is that through an association, a trade? Is that through a hobby that they're trying to get educated on? Is that from coaching or consulting that they're seeking advice on? Where do they get educated? Write down a couple ideas there. The next thing is, where does your ideal client gather? Where do they get in groups, right? Are they part of an association? Are they part of a family group? Are they part of a senior center group? Like, They get together somewhere, figure out where they gather. Again, 2-3 places. Next, where do they seek influence? Who influences your ideal client, right? Who has influence over them? So that could be people that inspire them. It could be celebrities. It could be Ben's podcast, right? There's people that inspire people, right? Who influences and inspires them? Who trust, right? Who do your ideal clients trust? So that's typically those deep advisor relationships, financial advisors, coaches, consultants, mentors, mastermind groups. Who has that level of trust? And then the last thing I want you to put on the list is who do you know that's a connector, right? Who in your network is a connector? Just by going through that exercise and unlocking all of those people who have access to your ideal client, it should start changing your ask. And you should find some lanes in there. And this is the homework I always tell people is I want you to pick a couple where it's easy conversations because you can align with the person you identified and they have access to your ideal client. If it's an easy conversation and they have access, that should become your new ask. And so anytime someone asks you, who do you want to connect with? That is all you should ever be replying with because it unlocks that many to many relationship we talked about earlier.
It sounds like we take a moment to do a little bit of strategy and then everything else isn't, oh, Devin's the greatest on earth, Ben's the greatest on earth. It's leaning on connectors, it's leaning on others, getting help. But if we have clarity, it's easier to get that kind of help.
Yeah, you have to have the aha moment with who you want to connect with and get out of the rat race for the ideal client and the traditional referral partners. I want you to find the unique thing for you, for your industry, and I want your ask to change. Because just by changing your ask, you're going to see impact. Now, there's so much more to the process and system and language and how we do stuff and the core principles. But if you just change the ask, the impact will show up.
Devin, time flies by. So just buy a book. That's the best way I can support you.
Yeah, buy a book or write a book. I'm happy to talk to you about both. If for some reason you are inspired to write a book, I'd love to talk to you. And see if we could make a book a fit for you. Otherwise, grab a copy and let me know what you think about it. Reviews are awesome. Buying a copy is appreciated. And hopefully you get some value and I inspire you to make it the one connection that'll have a massive impact on you or your business.
Rock and roll, Devin. Thanks for coming on the show. This was fun.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.